So one thing you'll notice I've covered with COVID is the idea of natural immunity and how basically the crazies in the political arena and the news media are now in denial of it. You know, and I made that other video showing how the WHO basically originally said that herd immunity comes from a combination of natural immunity and vaccination. And then they changed that to say, no, it's not from natural immunity, it's just from vaccination. And that's absolutely crazy because the math doesn't care why you're immune, just that you're immune. So what we have here is a good review of that. Prior COVID infection or vaccine herd immunity facts. So we'll just go over the facts from Sherry Baker, and she says, developing a strong immune response that stops the coronavirus in its tracks can go far to keep you free of the infection. And there are 3 ways that immunity can develop. And remember that the total proportion of immunity in the population has to do with the herd immunity, the community immunity, whatever you want to call it. That's basically what's going to pretty much stop the disease in its tracks. And for COVID, it's been shown basically to be, 60 to 65%. You probably want 70% to have a good. And of course, the higher you can get it, the better. Because if you remember my herd immunity simulator from way back, you don't want to just be squeaking by with the bare level of herd immunity. You want as much as you can get. So here we're talking about the 3 ways of becoming immune, and the first is natural immunity. This is a valid form of immunity, and this is the kind of thing that's been driving me crazy about. Even more mainstream skeptics have been doing this, and this is crap straight from the anti-vaxxers. Just denying herd immunity and even germ theory up and down a blue streak. But as she says, if you've tested positive for the coronavirus, even if the infection didn't make you sick, your body typically made protective antibodies to fight the infection. Getting vaccinated is a proactive way to get protected. All of the COVID vaccines create antibodies to keep the coronavirus at bay. If you were infected with COVID previously and get vaccinated, you may have a powerful combined immunity. That's the situation I'm in. I had COVID over the holidays, and I got my first shot a couple of weeks ago. I get my second one on Tuesday, which I think is when this video might be going up for the public on YouTube and Odyssey and everywhere else it goes. So yeah, getting them both together is good, but I mean, if you can avoid the natural immunity, COVID is not fun to go through. But the good news, while more research is needed, evidence is mounting, immunity may last longer than previously assumed. Of course, even if most of the population has some immunity to COVID-19 eventually, that doesn't mean the virus will completely disappear. In fact, it has mutated in some places and may always linger and reemerge from time to time. And we've talked about this. Generally, the way the mutations work is they might make the virus easier to spread, but they'll make it less intense, and those go together. Because a virus will spread more easily if you're up and walking around and not feeling too sick, as opposed to if you're lying around in bed all day because you don't feel like getting up. So the tendency is for these kinds of viruses to just mutate and turn into a more harmless form of the common cold. But if immunity is widespread and fairly robust, however, future outbreaks will likely be manageable, potentially preventing widespread lockdowns and other serious societal and economic repercussions. And she credits natural immunity plus vaccinations as helping to beat COVID in the U.S. Herd immunity describes the indirect protection from an infectious disease. If you're not vaccinated and you don't have any kind of immunity, how do you avoid getting it? Well, you avoid it by most of the people around you being immune. So they kind of like make a barrier in front of you. It occurs when most of the population becomes immune either through vaccination or immunity they developed from previous infection, the World Health Organization explains. Until they changed it, and I don't know if they went back on their changes, but things are starting to get a little less crazy, which is good. Over half of the American population has received at least one dose of a COVID vaccine, and Vermont, Maine, Connecticut, and Massachusetts report that more than half the residents of those states are fully vaccinated. There's no way to know how many people in a state who are not vaccinated have natural immunity to the virus from a prior infection, which could have been so mild or asymptomatic it was not documented. Everyone would have to be tested for antibodies to the coronavirus regularly to come up with a statistic showing who has ongoing natural immunity and who does not. There's little doubt natural immunity, acquired by folks who already had COVID-19 and recovered, is playing an important role in slowing the pandemic and helping the U.S. move toward an appreciable amount of herd immunity. And it happened far too late. We could have been doing this from the very beginning, as I've said from the very beginning, and was flamed right and left as being anti-science and dangerous and just the crazy stuff. Really dumb things that people were saying like, oh, herd immunity requires people to die from the disease. No, herd immunity only works when people don't die from the disease, and so they're walking around being immune. If you die, you're kind of taken out of the equation. Herd immunity is good, and while it's better to get it from vaccinations so no one gets sick, if you engage in targeted protection of the vulnerable and quarantining of the sick, everyone else can go about their business, and with a minimal amount of harm, you can build up a strong amount of immunity in the population without destroying the economy. And I'm radical enough to think that's a good thing. She cites Scott Gottlieb, MD, a medical policy and public health expert who used to lead the Food and Drug Administration, and he talked about declining infection levels of COVID-19 infections are certainly the result of more Americans receiving vaccinations to protect from the coronavirus, but vaccinations don't tell the whole story. He believes fewer cases are also due to many unvaccinated people already having immunity to COVID from previous infections. Official U.S. statistics list about 33 million confirmed COVID cases, but Gottlieb believes that's a significant undercount. He contends at least one-third of Americans, more than 100 million people, have been infected with the coronavirus. Quote, we don't have data on this, but my guess would be that the infection level among the unvaccinated population is probably higher because a lot of people probably aren't getting the vaccine because they knew they were previously infected. So if you assume that the percent of prior infection among the unvaccinated population is more than that third, and it probably is, and you assume that we're given at least one dose to around half the population right now, we're approaching pretty high levels of immunity. Of course, there are people who are going to be members of both sets like myself, both vaccinated and COVID survivors, so it's difficult to know what that portion is, but although there are very rare reports of people having COVID more than once, the antibodies from past infection likely protect most people from catching it again and transmitting it to others. How long the protection lasts isn't known exactly, but there's reason to think it may last longer than previously assumed. And this is something else I've talked about, because from the very beginning there were people predicting that there would be lasting immunity from getting COVID, and other people in the more scaremongering set who were saying, no, immunity would go away and we need to keep everyone locked down until we get a vaccine. Well, so far, the predictions of those assuming lasting infection have been borne out. And it's been pretty reliable. Some of the strongest evidence about the lasting power of post-infection antibodies and other immune system factors revved up to keep people from having another bout of the infection comes from a National Institutes of Health funded study conducted by scientists from the Center for Infectious and Vaccine Research at the La Jolla Institute for Immunology. You can read out the rest of that source for yourself. The researchers analyzed immune cells and antibodies from almost 200 people who had been exposed to COVID and recovered from the infection. The results, published in Science, found the protection was strong, lasted for at least 8 months, and declined only slightly 6 to 8 months after infection. What's more, some virus-fighting B cells increased over time, with the levels reaching a plateau after a few months and then not declining for the entire length of the study. T cells, another part of the immune system's arsenal to fight off all viruses, also remained high for months after the infection. And this is something else to understand. People have been talking a lot about antibodies, and the fearmongers have been talking about, oh, the antibodies are going away with natural immunity. Well, the antibodies are going to go away, but you can have these immune cells, these B cells and T cells, they're memory cells. They remember how to make these antibodies and can do it again at a moment's notice. So it's kind of like your immune system's hard drive. It saved all of this information to its hard drive, and then as soon as it gets infected, it says, I know how to deal with this. It goes back to its hard drive, runs the program, and produces antibodies all over again. And this is something you need to look out for, because if they're just talking about antibodies and clutching their pearls about how quickly the antibodies drop off, then in my personal view, they're engaging in fraud because you need to look at the immune cells as well. And that's what they did. They say both the number of antibodies as well as the amount of different immune cell types varied substantially among the people tested. 8 months after their initial infection, the vast majority of research subjects, 95%, still had, at a minimum, 3 of 5 immune system components that protect against the COVID-19 causing virus. And one of the study's authors said, quote, "Several months ago, our study showed that natural infection induced a strong response, and this study now shows the responses last. We are hopeful that a similar pattern of responses lasting over time will also emerge for the vaccine-induced responses." And then there's a study at Washington University School of Medicine found people who have had a mild case of COVID-19 and recovered may have long-term protection against the disease because, post-infection, their immune cells are still pumping out antibodies against the virus. The findings, published in the journal Nature, even suggest mild cases of COVID-19 leave those infected with immune cell activations that may protect from new COVID-19 infections for a lifetime. And senior author Ali Elabedi said, quote, "Last fall, there were reports that antibodies wane quickly after infection with the virus that causes COVID-19. And the national media quickly reported, inaccurately, that meant protection from the virus was short-lived." But he says, quote, "But that's a misinterpretation of the data. It is normal for antibody levels to go down after acute infection. But they don't go down to zero. They plateau. Here, we found antibody-producing cells in people 11 months after first symptoms. These cells will live and produce antibodies for the rest of people's lives. That's strong evidence for long-lasting immunity." So yeah, these cells, you have the B cells and the T cells, and if I remember correctly, the T cells are stored in the bone marrow and the B cells are stored in the lymph nodes, and they'll keep producing low levels of antibodies in the bloodstream, but as soon as an infection happens again, they'll kick back in and produce higher levels, and so they wanted to see if people who had recovered from mild COVID cases might still have plasma cells in their bone marrow that produce antibodies to fight SARS-CoV-2. The results showed that almost all of the bone marrow samples from people who had been infected with COVID-19 contained antibody-producing cells specifically targeting the coronavirus, but none of the people who had never been sick with COVID had those antibody-producing cells in their bone marrow. Although it's a small study and more research is needed, it does raise the possibility that natural immunity may last far longer than was originally assumed. Next, Elabedi and colleagues plan to study whether vaccinations for COVID-19 also result in long-lived antibody-producing cells in the bone marrow. And so what about a combined immunity? If you've had COVID, should you get the vaccine? The CDC and other medical experts urge those who have had the virus to get vaccinated. The only exception are people whose coronavirus infection was treated with monoclonal antibodies. They need to wait about 90 days before receiving the vaccine because the antibodies may neutralize the vaccine if given sooner. And then we have Anthony Fauci himself. This is the man. This is the fearmonger, the political hack who does everything he can to scare people about, oh, this mystical herd immunity. It's really crazy, the number of people who are denying herd immunity these days. But even he says the combination of natural immunity from having the coronavirus plus the protection from vaccination can be even more powerful protection than either alone. It may also protect against some of the COVID-19 variants, which is something else they've been fear-mongering about. They think, oh, these variants, all of our immunity is going to be useless. All of our vaccines are useless. No, they aren't. No, they aren't. Scientists at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center have produced laboratory evidence that patients who were infected with the coronavirus and recovered, and who were subsequently vaccinated against COVID-19, have a significantly stronger combined immunity than people who were never infected with the coronavirus but received the vaccination. And in fact, just one shot of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines boosted the immune response against COVID-19 by as much as 1,000 times in people who had previously been infected with the coronavirus. The immune response also reacted strongly to the variants of concern first identified in South Africa. A second dose of COVID-19 vaccine in the previously infected didn't boost the already strong immunity the first dose elicited. This suggests that only one shot of a COVID-19 vaccine may be all that most people who already had the coronavirus may need to avoid another infection. And that's something they've been speculating for a while. If you've had it before, you only need one. You don't need both of them. I'm getting both anyway, because why not? It's not going to harm you, people. Don't listen to the fearmongers. They'll keep an eye on you for a few minutes. They'll have the EpiPens on standby, just in case you get anaphylaxis. But other than that, it's just the usual stuff. Oh, someone got the vaccine, and then this happened. Therefore, the vaccine must have caused it. And it's so sneaky about it that it only causes it in the same amounts as it appears in the normal population. That's how it was with the blood clots. That's how it is with the liver stuff. That's just how it is. So don't sweat it. Just get vaccinated and get on with your life. If you've already had it, consider getting vaccinated. At least one dose. But you do have strong immunity just from getting it. Not as strong as if you're both, and you'll be protected from variants as well. But it's all good. We just need to get immunity. And that's exactly what the lockdowns have been preventing. And it's crazy. It's completely crazy. I'm really waiting for the day that all of the lockdown people just get on their knees and beg forgiveness from everyone else for all the crap they put us through needlessly, all the extra deaths, all the damage to the economy, all of the lost jobs. I don't expect it from politicians and the news media, but the people out there who are backing them up, who are flaming all of us in the comments, who were saying things like, "Oh, you want to kill Grandma!" It just might be nice to hear an acknowledgement. To say, you know what? I guess you were right. We'll know for next time, and we won't ever put up with this crap again. We know who to listen to now, and we'll do better next time, because there will be a next time. This happens, people. This has been happening to human beings for thousands of years, millions of years. It'll keep happening. So hopefully we've learned a valuable lesson here. Thank you very much. Comments for the Comment God, shares for the Share Throne, like, subscribe, and the bell. All that good stuff. Or just watch over on Odyssey.com, where it's always monetized and never censored. All sorts of great channels over there. Not just the nuts like me, but actual, regular channels. Shotiversity is over there. A whole bunch of other... Khan Academy is over there. So, yeah, it's growing. It's getting a lot of attention. And it's getting better and better all the time. So hopefully we'll see you there. If not, we'll see you here for the next one. And until then, stay strong and be free.